Grace and peace to you from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Wonderful to be with you again today. A number of people have asked me over the past wee while, how do you preach? That's always a great question to be asked, and it's much better than being asked, why do you preach? And by how do you preach, folks mean, what's my sermon preparation? And I'm going to stop there just for a second. If you're one of those people that have no interest whatsoever in how I prepare a sermon, stick with this. There's a bigger point I'm going to make by the end, I promise you, okay? Just stick with me. The first thing I do is I read the text, the biblical text, over and over and over. And that's particularly important if it's a text that's really familiar to me. Because familiarity breeds contempt, and before you know it, you're not really reading it thoroughly, and you miss things that God might want you to see this time around. So I read the text over and over and over, and then I hit the books. I find every preaching help, every commentary, books published by scholars based on sometimes a word for word analysis of the biblical text. I dip into other books that are written on topics that the biblical text engages with that week. I make notes. I prepare my weekly devotion that goes out in Connections on a Tuesday. And then I just pray and think and watch and listen. That's the fun bit. Not so much the books stuff, but the listening and watching. This life provides all the sermon illustrations I could ever hope for. I see things and think, that kind of speaks to this text or that text, and I make a note of it. I listened to the birds chirping one morning, and I think of joyful noise unto the Lord. Once we were in a wave pool at a water park. Little kids swam by with one of those kids' life preservers on. And the grandpa came along, and on the back of the kid's life jacket was a little grab handle and just lifted the kid out of the water. I used that in a sermon. I was even preparing for a funeral once, talking to a mother and father about their adult daughter who'd passed away, and I was talking to them and to her brother. And I said to the brother, and do you have any recollections you want to share? And he says, I'm not telling you. And I looked, slightly offended and puzzled, and he laughed and he says, no, I know what you preachers are like. You're going to steal all of my best stories about my sister. I'm not telling you anything. I'll tell the stories at the funeral. And he's right. Preachers are magpies. We find God and illustrations of God and messages from God everywhere. And because we have to, preachers like me, have to preach every single Sunday, year after year after year, we become pretty attuned to looking out for things, seeing things and hearing things in a way different than non-preachers do. And here's the point I was going to make, where at the start of this talk I warned people, if you're not interested in my sermon prep, stick with it. There's a bigger point I'm going to make, and here is the bigger point. One day I was talking about my sermon prep technique to a friend who is deeply involved in spiritual exercises, the spirituality of faith. And when I got to the end of describing what I do and how preachers like me just see and hear and experience the world a little differently because we're collecting sermon material, he said, that's a form of spirituality. He says, in fact, it's a deep form of spirituality. To be so connected to God and so connected to our relationship with God and our relationship with each other in the communion of faith and in the wider world that God created, to the extent that we see and hear God's love and grace permeating through everything. For me, the gratitude comes when I say, "Thanks, boss, I got another sermon out of that." And for others, is a deep sense of gratitude that God still speaks to us, still loves us, and still showers us with grace. So whether you're a preacher or not, a pastor or not, whether you think of yourself as deeply spiritual or not, there's a beautiful definition of the spiritual life: to see and hear God in all times and places and peoples. May God be with you until we meet again.